This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
NASCAR champion and three-time Daytona 500 winner, the legendary Bobby Allison, on this edition of Conversations. Welcome to Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you for spending some time with us. We are absolutely pleased to have as our guest Bobby Allison, a legend in the automobile racing business and particularly in NASCAR. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Take me back to how Bobby Allison first got interested and started in the racing business.
Well, you know, for a long time people have known I've been from Alabama,
Right.
you know, leader of the Alabama gang, all those kind of things. But I was born and raised in Miami.
Okay.
And I was the fourth member of a 12-member family, 10 children, mom and dad, and 10 of us. I was fourth in line. And my grandpa came to live with us, Grandpa Patton, mom's dad. And he was a big sports fan. And so he would take one of us children at a time and go to an event. And one night, I was about 10 years old, I guess, he said to me, "Come on, Bobby, we're going to the car races." And took me out to the old original Opelika Speedway. Was on the Opelika Air Base there in Miami, and they had the car races. And I fell in love with it and pursued it. When I was a senior in high school, they started an amateur division at Hialeah Speedway. Hialeah Speedway was new at the time, and they got it going and started an amateur division. And a quarterback on the football team by the name of Fran Kersey was a personal friend of mine. And Fran had a 38 Chevy Coupe. And so I worked some things around. I got to buy that thing from him and drove it out to the track and painted a number on the door and raced.
When did you win your first race?
The third week of that activity, I won. The first week there were about 30 cars there, and I thought it was really a great activity, and I finished, I think, 7th. The second week there were about 40 cars there, and I was all pumped up, finished 7th again. And the third week there were about 50 cars there. They were parked everywhere in the outline area around the gates of the racetrack, and about 50 cars in the race, and I won the race. So I was on my way.
You were hooked at that point. What took you from South Florida to Alabama?
Well, a lot of things. First of all, got to understand also I didn't grow until I was 19 years old. When I was a senior in high school, I was 5'4" and weighed 110 pounds. But I was racing, and that's all that mattered to me. I got out of high school, graduated from high school, and my mom thought that she should get me away from this racing stuff because, you know, Hialeah had the speedway and you know, they were building Medley, and West Palm Beach had a speedway, and just a lot of this racing stuff went on, and all those guys wore dirty clothes and, you know, didn't do the things my mom thought that all young men ought to be doing. And so she wanted to get me away from there. And one of her sisters, my Aunt Patty, was married to Uncle Jimmie. And Uncle Jimmie was the vice president, sales manager of Mercury Outboard Motors up in Wisconsin. So she thought, well, she'd work something out and get me to Wisconsin, get me away from this racing. So got Uncle Jimmie to call me up, and I went to Wisconsin. And 17-year-old, I had the ideal deal. I drove a boat around the lakes and rivers of Wisconsin all day, every day, and they gave me a paycheck on Friday. But the other part of it was every little town in Wisconsin had a racetrack. And during the summer, they ran 7 nights a week, sometimes twice on Saturday and twice on Sunday. And I didn't race there then, but I went to a lot of races and watched people and saw how people would work to try to get successful. And I got a hero real early on the thing. There was a fellow by the name of Miles the Mouse Melius, and his nickname Mouse came from the fact that he could go in and out of tight places and not get his car skinned up. And even though it was dirt, you know, those tracks at the time were dirt up there. The Florida tracks were paved, ironically, but the little tracks in Wisconsin were dirt. And Even on the dirt, he kept his car looking really nice, and he won a lot, and I was impressed with that. And in addition to that little part of the story is just a couple years ago, I went to Wisconsin and inducted Miles the Mouse Melius in the Wisconsin Auto Racing Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's cool.
He's 90 years old.
Wow.
And a great friend and a great hero of mine. And so to be able to get that privilege to go up there and induct him in the Hall of Fame up there was really okay. But did that, and then from there, when it froze over up there, they shipped 4 of us youngsters in the boathouse down to the old Southern Winter Proving Grounds that was at Sarasota. From there, I went to the Kike for Race Team race shop in Charlotte, North Carolina, was there for 2 months, and then came back to South Florida and restarted my career. Got going pretty good, and one day a fella said, we heard there's good tracks in Alabama. Do you want to go? And I said, yeah, let's go. So I went to Alabama, and sure enough, I won my first professional feature race of my career the second week I was in Alabama.
Is that right?
And of course made that home and loved it there, and the people were so good to me, the tracks were good, and the tracks were paved, and I felt like the pavement really was what I needed to get the best at because of the big speedways being paved. And I loved the country, and the people were good to me, and I got to come down here to Pensacola even a few times way back in the early days, and I saw a lot of good racetracks and met a lot of really good people, and my career really went on from there.
Speaking of Pensacola, we're taping this interview in Pensacola, Florida, which is home to the Snowball Derby, which is one of the legendary short track racing events in the nation. And now you raced in the Snowball a couple times, didn't you?
Yeah, I raced in the Snowball lots and lots of times without ever getting a win in the Snowball. And I won it at Five Flag Speedway, but not in the Snowball. And that was always a big disappointment to me. And if I had time to work it in this weekend, I might try to sneak out there and maybe even try to win that thing again.
That'd be great. Now, your brother Donnie did win it, though.
Yes, he did.
That's right. But you got a couple of three Daytona 500s.
Yeah, 3 Daytona 500s, which was a great thrill for me. The first one came under all the worst circumstances. The qualifying races got rained out on Thursday, and they raced them on Friday morning. And I was doing really good. Right at the end of the race, got wrecked really bad and thought I was out of the deal. The boys patched the car up. Bud Moore and his crew patched the car up real good, the Thunderbird. And, I started 33rd in the race on that Sunday and won my first Daytona 500. So, went from happy to sad and back to happy and then to ecstatic.
Well, that's the thing about racing. You got a lot of ups and downs. How important is it to keep your cool when you're going through that sort of stuff?
Well, I think it is really, really important. I've always felt that way, but I didn't always act that way. A lot of times you can figure out what to do by what you did wrong the week before, and fortunately I had some people that helped guide me along on that, and staying positive on the whole program always was a very important part of the whole picture. I had a lot of times where something really difficult would happen, and was able to stay positive and then go ahead and get the win anyway. So that's important.
Take me through the other couple of Daytona 500 wins. You were probably probably the one you're most well known for is when you won and Davey finished second. And tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. It'd be real easy for me to tell you a little bit about that because, see, that happened in 1988, and I won the race. The best young man in racing finished second to me, my son Davey. But a few months later, in fact 4 months later, I was injured at Pocono with a serious head injury, and I don't remember Daytona 1988. They tell me I won it.
You did.
Okay. It's one of those really crazy things that happened. In my early recovery, I had terrible memory loss. A lot of good friends that I couldn't remember, and events and all sorts of things. I really had to Judy had to spend a lot of time schooling me and guiding me along, and just almost everything has come back, but the '88 Daytona racing and any of the '88 racing still. Well, there are 3 small events that non-NASCAR events that you know, I used to do a lot of those things, but there are 3 of those that I do remember some of. My son Clifford and I and a third fellow ran the 24-hour race, and we had a good old time with that. We were leading our division by a big margin when the car failed about midway through the night, and but I remember that. And then we went to Australia and did that Australia race, and I remember the Australia race. And then we did a little race at the old Texas Speedway at College Station, where the track had deteriorated, so they had to use the road course through the infield, and part of the big track, they used the 3rd and 4th turn in the front straightaway of the big track and then turned into the infield. And I won that race, and I remember it. But, you know, I won that Daytona 500, they tell me.
You did.
Okay.
It's on tape. You were talking about road courses. How did you know, NASCAR is not necessarily known for its road course racing other than Sears Point and Watkins Glen. How did, and I guess when you were running Riverside.
Riverside, yeah.
How did you like running the road courses?
Well, I really got onto the road courses. I really liked it. Went to Riverside and got a little bit of coaching from a guy by the name of Chuck Day, and found out how to make a car go around the course quick and do good right-hand turns as well as left-hand. And I'm quite sure that I have the most wins at Riverside, you know, counting the IROC and the Saturday races, which at the time were sportsmen, and then the Grand National races, which were the main events. I won that several times, and I'm quite sure I have the most wins of anybody at Riverside. And I really, really liked it. I ran at some of the other tracks, but I also won on the road course in the infield at Daytona twice.
Okay.
And so I thought road racing was really neat. You had to do everything. You had to shift, and you had to turn both directions and accelerate and stop and do all those things right. And I really enjoyed it.
Would you like to see more road racing on the NASCAR circuit these days besides just the 2?
Well, I probably would, but I'm not sure that it's exactly what the TV audience needs. You know, the TV coverage is so good even on the road courses now that you can really do a pretty good job. But the speedways, and especially the 1.5 mile speedways, 1.5 miles, even the 2 miles, Michigan, Fontana, but then back down to the 1.5 mile Charlotte and Atlanta, I guess Las Vegas. And, you know, the rest of the 1.5 mile super speedways are just right for this type of racing, for NASCAR Cup type racing. And, you know, it's a good show. It's, you know, the speed is there, but also the excitement is there, and they're close enough that you still can stay in touch with it even when the cars maybe are on the other side of the track.
Speaking of today's racing, what do you think of the car of tomorrow?
Well, the car tomorrow really is not my favorite. I'm really sensitive to the idea that NASCAR put the safety features into it, but I think those safety features could have been put into a Ford or a Chevy or a Dodge or a Toyota. The car tomorrow is a car that was manufactured out of somebody's own idea process, and all the cars are the same. The engines are different, but everything else about the car is pretty much, it's like the IROC. The racing is still really good because the competitors make it good. But I think the fans would really like to see a Ford race against a Chevy or a Dodge or a Toyota than to see this generic race car.
Speaking of that, you know, one of the reasons the car tomorrow came about obviously was safety, and you just touched on that. And your wreck at Talladega is the whole reason that the restrictor plates came about. What do you think of restrictor plate racing?
Well, now I'll say this: In my opinion, restrictor plates are the best, most fair thing NASCAR ever did, but they happen to have the worst reputation. And the guy that says, if I didn't have this restrictor plate, I could win, sure he could. If he didn't have it and everybody else still had it, he could win. The restrictor plates did not bunch the cars together. The restrictor plates made the speeds 15 miles an hour slower so that the wreck wasn't as violent as it was without the restrictor plate. The cars are bunched together because the effort is so strong and everybody's commitment is so sincere in this thing from NASCAR that if somebody else figures out how to get another half a mile an hour out of their car, there are 42 other teams that are really seeking that same answer right then. And somehow they get it.
As you look across the field that's out there today, who do you like?
Well, it'd be way easier to say who don't you like, except I don't want to say that.
Okay.
But there are so many guys that are so good out there, in my opinion. You know, and this year's champion, who is now the 4-time in a row champion, Jimmie Johnson, is got to be one of the all-time guys right there at the top. And I probably didn't give him enough credit until this year. Mm-hmm. And I began to look at it from the standpoint of, you know, this guy continues to do the right things at the right place at the right time week after week, where these other guys that I've always had high regard for do the right thing at the right time almost all the time. And Jimmie Johnson, you know, just did such a great job of that. But there are so many others. And, you know, I really like Kyle Busch. You know, he's really enthusiastic, and he's right there at the edge. You know, he's got some friends, and he's got some that aren't too friendly with him. but he's full of enthusiasm, and he's got a lot of talent. But then we got Joey Logano coming along, and several other youngsters that are right there in the wings, waiting in the wings. And you got so many of the veterans that are still really, really good race car drivers, and the show is really good week after week on account of that.
Speaking of Jimmie Johnson and all the success that they've had, how much of that, in your opinion, is Jimmie Johnson, and how much of it is that whole team, Chad Knaus and that whole group?
Well, certainly Jimmie Johnson is a big contributor to it, but the whole team is the real answer. Chad Knaus, the direction from Rick Hendrick, and the support of all the guys that do everything on that team, from the guy that sweeps the shop when the guys leave to go to the track, you know, the guy that stays home and cleans up. All of those guys are important, and they're part of that team that produced that ideal situation for Jimmie to win the races and the championships.
Let me name a couple of guys off and just kind of give me a couple of words of what you think about them. Tony Stewart.
Tony Stewart, I wasn't his biggest fan for a long, long time, but I recognized that he had talent. But then Tony moved into this new venture, and he's done such a really nice job with that he's won me over even more. The guy's a heck of a talent, but a great businessman on top of that, and I recognize that part because I never was a good businessman. You know, I could race pretty good, but you know, the business part of it, sometimes I could have made some other decisions along the way. But Tony has done a great job as far as the driving, but then to move into the business part of it, he's done a really nice job, and he's to be admired.
Jeff Gordon.
Jeff Gordon is really, really up there on the talent. He should have won more than he's won, and he should have more championships than he has, in my opinion, but somehow that didn't happen. But I respect him and admire his talent an awful lot.
There's been some talk about women coming into NASCAR and gaining a foothold. Danica Patrick, for example, may or may not end up driving the Snowball Derby in 2009 on the pole as a young lady, Johanna Long. What do you think of women being in NASCAR?
Well, I think you know, it's another very delightful look at this sport that we all love so much. They want to be part of it. Many years ago, you know, I had the opinion that there were some of these sweet little girls driving their pickup truck to school or driving their little Camaro or Mustang to school that would watch that TV and see old Dale Earnhardt Sr. up there doing his stuff, and they'd say, boy, he wouldn't do that to me, which meant that they would be ready to get in there and rub fenders if they needed to, but also step on the gas.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens as women more and more get into the sport.
Yeah.
Let's go back, speaking of Daytona, because this is historic. It was, I believe the year was 1979. The weather is bad in the Northeast, big nor'easter, but lots of folks at home watching television. And I believe it was the first live telecast of the Daytona 500.
Yeah, wire to wire, yeah.
Wire to wire coverage. Your brother is leading. Donnie Allison is leading. Cale Yarbrough's running second. Take it from there.
Well, it's the last lap, and Cale can't get by him, so he runs into him. And the two of them end up in the wall, all torn up real bad. I had won the race the year before, and I was in the same car, but it wasn't quite as good that day for me. And I had lost a couple laps in an earlier spin out, and I was back here in 11th, trucking along, doing my job, finishing. And my radio guy comes on and says, Donnie and Cale are really going at each other. They're coming up on you, give them a lot of room. I said, well, they won't catch me, but if they get close, I'll get way out of the way. So with that, I turned into turn 3, and the caution lights come on. And well, actually, I'm coming out of turn 4, I guess, and the caution lights come on. And so I take the yellow flag, which in those days was always slow down, whether it was the last lap or what it was. I got the white flag and the caution flag, and slowed down. And I wasn't racing anybody anyway. I had a lot of room around me. Came down the back straightaway, and I see all this wreckage, and I mean, I could tell it was really a full-time wreck. But as I get to the cars, you know, Donnie's car is kind of over there toward where the little infield lake is, and in the grass, and there's a lot of wet grass because it had rained the night before. And he's got a couple of safety workers around him. He's getting out of the car, and he looks okay. And Cale's further down, and he's getting out of his car, and a couple safety workers there. And so I go around and finish the race, which is my job. Mm-hmm. I get the checker flag, and I slow down, I pull up, and the cars are about 50, 75 feet apart, so I stopped abreast of where Donnie's car was, and yelled, Donnie, do you want to ride back to the garage area? And he's all disgusted. He's, nah, go on, I'll get a ride. So I start to put the thing in gear, and with that, Cale's standing over there, and he starts yelling that the wreck is my fault. And I think I questioned his ancestry. Well, that did not settle him down any. He had his helmet in his hand. He came running toward me, and he's yelling at me some more. And he got about 6 or 8 feet from the car and stopped, yelled a little bit more, and I think I questioned his ancestry a little further, which that wasn't very smart either. He lunged at me, and he hit me in the face with his helmet. Well, now I'm sitting in the car with the seat belts on, but I have the window net down, got my helmet on, but he hits me in the face with his helmet. Man, that hurt. It surprised me, but it hurt, and I'm bleeding. My nose and lip is cut and bleeding in my lap. And so I said to myself, I got to get out of this car and handle this right now or run from him the rest of my life. So I got out of the car. Donnie says faster than he ever saw me get out of the car in my whole career. But I got out of the car, and old Cale went to beating on my fist with his nose. My story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's a great story. And of course, that's become one of the legendary events in NASCAR racing.
I'll tell you a better part of that whole story, too, though. NASCAR fined us $6,000 apiece for fighting on their property or whatever it was. Well, Donnie and Cale had finished second and third in the race, and so they had plenty of prize money. I had finished 11th in the Daytona 500 and had only won $4,000. So I had to get a check from home. I had to get Judy to write a check from home for $2,000 so we could race the next week at Rockingham. Paid my fine. after we were good boys for a few weeks, they refunded the prize money withheld. They still got my $2,000.
They ought to pay you a whole lot more.
Oh, they should.
Because that really.
What they did, they took the $6,000 fines and made commercials that they still use. And as of 3 weeks ago, they had grossed $55 billion off of it. But they haven't given us a royalty or a commission yet.
We've got about 2 minutes left. Tell me what you're up to these days.
Well, I'm traveling around doing some personal appearance stuff and, just trying to take care of business. Still have obligations, I went through a lot of things from the Pocono deal. NASCAR's insurance didn't pay for the medical stuff like they should have, and so it took me a long time to pay for that. So I'm still doing some personal appearance stuff, and I'll try to keep that going. And a little bit of consulting with some of the racers on occasion, and I enjoy going to the races still. Go to different events and.
You've got some books and die-casts available on your website?
Yeah, I was the Grand Marshal for the Charlotte 600 this year. And so an outfit built this die-cast car, which is a replica of the car that I won the 71 Coke 600 in. And the thing is detailed to perfection. It's got the engine like it was back then. Got the underneath stuff on the car like it was back then. Inside the car, fuel cell. It's really a nice piece. And my daughter Bonnie takes care of distributing those things, off of the website, bobbyallison.com. And along with, the books and things, we did, this first book was a real big help to me, that Circle of Triumph that Ben White did, because when Ben wanted to do the book, he knew about my racing career because he had followed me closely, and we had a friendship to some point along the way. But as he asked me questions about things, it lit the light for me. Brought a lot of memory back, and so that was good. But then we did the second book, which is a coffee table style book. Judy got a lot of her pictures that she was fond of out, and so it's got a lot of pictures in it, and it's just stories about the different events.
Okay.
And also in the book, Bonnie gave us the suggestion to do a CD with me telling the stories, so you don't even have to read it.
That's great.
You listen to it and look at the pictures.
That's great.
And me and Tim Packman that did the book for me will promise you that most of the stories are nearly true.
Oh, sounds good. Bobby Allison, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so
Super.
much.
Good deal.
Legendary NASCAR champion, 3-time Daytona 500 winner, Bobby Allison on this edition of Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Take good care of yourself. Thanks for watching.